Hey guys, tonight we begin with something darker than a medieval cellar and just as musty. You're waking up in the year 1325, give or take a few decades, but trust me, the mattress situation hasn't improved in any of them. You stir to consciousness, curled like a pretzel on a half-rotted pile of straw that technically counts as a bed. It smells like wet goat. Not in a poetic way. No, it literally smells like a wet goat because it was a barn floor until 3 months ago. Fleas scatter as you move. You scratch, but it only makes it worse. You don't have a pillow. You don't have a blanket. You have a wool sack that weighs about the same as a cow and hasn't been washed since last winter. Don't sniff it. You'll regret it. Somewhere off in the distance, a church bell clanks like a drunken blacksmith dropping pans down a staircase. That's your alarm clock. It's loud, it's judgmental, and it doesn't have a snooze button. You groan and shift, every joint creaking like old wood. You're 22, which in medieval terms is roughly the equivalent of middle-aged with a side of sciatica. Your knees sound like someone is shaking a pouch full of bones. Because, well, someone kind of is. It's you. You're the pouch. Your house, if we can be generous and call it that, is a single wooden room with zero insulation and one door that moans louder than your stomach. It has no windows, just a gap in the wall that lets in cold air, rain, and the occasional confused chicken. You, your siblings, your parents, your great-aunt, 2 goats, and 1 very vocal rooster all share this one blessed open-concept living area. If you thought studio apartment sounded cosy, welcome to the real thing. The smell hits you before you fully rise. A heady blend of unwashed bodies, old beer, livestock breath, mildew, and a suspiciously sour undertone that might be the dog's corner. Historians still argue whether medieval people actually noticed the stench, or if they were just too used to it to care. You shift the blanket off. Well, not so much shift as peel. It clings with the kind of damp loyalty normally reserved for barnacles. The air bites your skin immediately. The fire went out sometime last night. Again. Firewood is a luxury, and your family has a strict shiver-it-out policy. You brace yourself and put your feet on the floor, which is either damp from last night's rain leaking through the thatch roof, or crusty from something the chickens left behind. Either way, congratulations. Your toes are now part of the local biosphere. There are no socks, no slippers, no indoor heating. You stand, stretching just enough to pull something in your back, and immediately regret everything. But there's no time to complain. The day won't wait, and neither will your mother's increasingly aggressive broom swipes to get everyone moving. You look around at your family all waking up simultaneously like a herd of grumpy sheep. Privacy is a myth. Your cousin snores like a wheezy bellows. Your father's already scratching at something in his beard. You suspect it's not a metaphor. Someone's baby is crying, but no one moves. It's not your turn. Maybe it's never your turn. You make peace with that. As the light starts to trickle in through the gaps in the boards, you catch sight of the outside world. Mud. More mud. The path to the well is already a soup of footprints and manure. A rooster crows defiantly. You make a note to side-eye him later. He knows what he did. You shuffle to the door, lifting the latch with a sigh, and take a breath of fresh air. Well, not fresh exactly. It's the medieval version of fresh, which means it doesn't immediately make your eyes water. But underneath the damp earth and wood smoke, there's always a background tang of human everything. The streets double as open sewers, and every rainstorm just rearranges the horror into new puddles. You're awake now. Congratulations. You've survived your first 5 minutes in the Middle Ages. You're cold, itchy, sore, and vaguely nauseated, but you're alive. The good news? You've still got a full day ahead. The bad news? You probably won't survive it. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. I love seeing where everyone's listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You take a cautious step into the day, barefoot, itchy, and already exhausted. The chickens scatter as you pass. One pecks your toe. Welcome to 1325. You haven't been awake for 10 minutes and already your body's plotting your downfall. But hold that thought, because nature is calling. And in medieval Europe, nature doesn't whisper politely. It screams like a tavern brawl at dawn. You head toward the back of the house. or what qualifies as the back. There's no hallway, no bathroom, and certainly no porcelain sanctuary with scented candles and soft lighting. Instead, you navigate around the sleeping goat and over your uncle's snoozing foot to reach a wooden bucket. That's it. That's the toilet. A cracked, splintered, well-loved bucket that has seen too much. You try not to make eye contact. If you're lucky, it was emptied yesterday. If not, well, you breathe through your mouth and get it over with. Congratulations! You've just completed your morning ablutions next to a stack of firewood and a loaf of stale bread someone dropped last week. This is not the kind of multifunctional space you'll ever see on a real estate listing. But wait, it gets worse. Now that the bucket's full, it's your job to empty it. And by empty, we mean launch it into the street like an Olympic discus thrower. Medieval towns had no sewer systems. Instead, they had open drains, or sometimes just gently sloping roads that encouraged your waste to find its own way downhill. Most people simply opened a window or door and flung it. But etiquette demands you first yell something like "Garde lou," Old French, for watch out below. Of course, nobody ever moves fast enough. If you're standing in the wrong place at the wrong time, you're getting a surprise bath in someone else's digestion. That's not hyperbole. That's urban planning in the 14th century. You make your way to the door, holding the sloshing bucket like it's a cursed artifact. Your siblings jeer. The goat watches with what you swear is judgment. You push open the door, squint at the light, and throw. It lands with a splat that echoes through the alley. A few chickens scatter. Somewhere down the street someone yells. You don't stay to find out who it was. Now here's a fun wrinkle. If you live near a river, congratulations. You have an even more convenient dumping site. Just walk your waist down to the water and let it float away with the dreams of sanitation. It's the same water people wash clothes in, draw drinking water from, and occasionally fish in. Historians still argue whether medieval rivers were more useful as resources or as public health disasters. Either way, you're definitely not dipping your toes in for fun. If you're among the lucky few, like castle level lucky, you might get to use a guardrobe. That's a long, narrow shaft built into the stone wall of a fortress that drops your business directly into the moat. Elegant, right? Except for the part where enemies occasionally try to climb in through it during sieges. Nothing says unwelcome visitor like a surprise ladder in your latrine chute. And public toilets? Oh, they exist, but don't get too excited. These are communal wooden benches, side by side, no partitions, and a hole beneath leading to a pit. You sit shoulder to shoulder with strangers, making awkward eye contact and pretending that this isn't deeply, deeply undignified. No toilet paper, of course. What you get instead depends on your creativity and your desperation. Straw is popular. So are moss, rags, leaves, and on rare, indulgent occasions, wool scraps. Historians debate whether using wool actually helped, or just added an extra layer of regret. Either way, if you're out of options, your hand is plan B, and soap. Let's just say it's not part of the routine. This may explain why handshakes didn't become popular for another few hundred years. After your unpleasant chore, you return to the house with frozen feet and a 1,000-yard stare. No one asks how it went. They know. Everyone's had their turn with the bucket. You set it back down by the door, where it will rest until its next cursed journey. Oh, and if you're wondering about bathing, we'll get to that. Spoiler. It's rare, frowned upon, and possibly considered dangerous. But for now, you've survived the morning's first great trial. The worst part? This was normal. Completely, boringly, distressingly normal. And that's your life in 1325 Europe. No plumbing, no privacy, no mercy. Just you, a bucket, and a society that said, close enough when it came to hygiene. After your harrowing bucket adventure, you stagger back inside like a soldier returning from war, except no one's cheering, and your reward is breakfast. If that word made you think of pancakes, eggs, or even something warm and vaguely hopeful, you're about to be disappointed. Deeply. Your family is huddled around a low fire pit in the centre of the room. Smoke curls toward the ceiling and lingers there, because chimneys are a luxury item and oxygen is apparently optional. A pot hangs over the flames, filled with a bubbling, colourless goo. You know this goo. You've seen it before. You've eaten it every morning since you grew teeth. Welcome to pottage. It's the meal, the myth, the medieval legend. Pottage is, well, it's food, technically. A sludgy mixture of boiled grains, turnips, and whatever roots or wild plants someone managed to dig up yesterday. It's been simmering for days, maybe weeks. New ingredients are just added on top of the old ones. You don't clean the pot, you just keep the cycle going. It's less of a recipe and more of a culinary compost heap. You sit down, take your bowl, wooden, cracked and suspiciously sticky, and scoop yourself a portion. It glops into your lap with the sound of defeat. The smell is earthy, which is a polite way of saying it reminds you of damp hay and whatever that goat stepped in last week. Next to the bowl is a hunk of bread. That's being generous. It's more like a brick made from coarse rye flour, sometimes mixed with crushed bark, dried beans or sawdust. Yes, sawdust. When harvests are bad, which is often, people stretch the dough with whatever they can find. You take a bite and immediately regret it. The crust could stop a sword. The inside is dense enough to develop its own gravity. You chew slowly, thoughtfully, and with just a hint of dread. What's for drinking? Well, not water. Definitely not water. Remember the river you dumped your bucket into this morning? That same river is where most people get their water. It's filled with parasites, waste, and mystery floaters. Drinking from it is like playing microbial roulette, except the gun's already loaded. Instead, you're given weak beer. At 6 a.m. Yes, even the kids get a mug. It's low in alcohol, high in safety, and only slightly better than the water. You sip it, trying not to think about how it was probably brewed in a wooden vat cleaned with a prayer and a stick. Historians still argue whether people actually liked medieval ale, or just pretended to for survival. Some records suggest certain brews were flavourful and complex. Others suggest it was flat, sour, and sometimes included ingredients like wormwood or tree bark. Either way, you're drinking it because the alternative is dysentery. You glance over at your younger brother. He's trying to fish something out of his pottage with a stick. It might be a bean. It might be a rock. It's best not to ask. Meanwhile, your grandmother is gnawing on her bread like a medieval beaver. No one speaks. Everyone's chewing, slowly, collectively accepting their fate. And meat? Cheese? Eggs? Dream on. Meat is reserved for feast days and the very rich. Most peasants eat it a few times a year, if that. A chicken is more valuable alive than in a pot. Cheese spoils fast. Eggs are saved for market, not your stomach. Your protein for the day is hope, and maybe a lentil. Sometimes, in rare moments of celebration, your family might add a bone to the pottage. Not for the meat, there usually isn't any, but to flavour the broth. The bone stays in the pot for days, passed down like a family heirloom. If you see a bone today, consider it a festival. Oh, and spices. Forget it. A pinch of black pepper costs more than your entire outfit. Nutmeg is worth its weight in gold. You have salt, maybe, if you're lucky enough to live near a coast or a mine. But mostly, your food tastes like sadness. You scrape the last of the pottage from your bowl and lick the spoon. Not because it's good, but because you're still hungry. Always hungry. There's never quite enough. You pass the bowl to your sister, who gives you a look that says, "You took the best part." You're not sure what the best part was. You're just glad it's over. You stand slowly. Your stomach's not full, but it's quiet. For now. You glance down at your crusty bread loaf and consider keeping it for later. It's basically a weapon. Might be useful if someone tries to steal your goat again. And with that, breakfast is over. The fire sputters. The pot simmers on. And your day... well, your day has just... You wipe your hands on your tunic. Not because it helps, but because that's what everyone does. The grease just blends into the patchwork of stains already decorating your clothes. Breakfast has passed through you emotionally, if not yet physically, and it's time to get dressed for the day. Spoiler, you already are. You don't have a wardrobe, you don't have options, you have an outfit. Singular. One tunic, one belt. Maybe, if you're lucky, an underlayer made from linen so coarse it could exfoliate tree bark. Your main garment is made of wool, itchy, thick, and dyed a brownish grey that makes you blend in with the mud, the walls, and your own despair. You grab a cloak, really just another rectangle of scratchy fabric with a hole for your head, and swing it around your shoulders like it's armour. It won't protect you from anything except, perhaps, self-esteem. You fasten it with a wooden toggle and step outside, ready to face the world, or at least ready to not be yelled at for staying indoors. Shoes? Maybe. If your family's doing well this year, you might have a pair of turn shoes, soft leather flats held together by hope and crude stitching. They're slippery, thin-soled, and about as waterproof as a sponge. If not, you're going barefoot again, through mud, sharp rocks, thorns, and the occasional unpleasant surprise left by livestock. Your feet are cracked, bruised, and more callous than skin. And remember, there's no soap, not for you, not for your clothes. If you're particularly ambitious and can spare a few hours and a whole day's firewood, you can heat water and wash your tunic in a wooden basin. Scrub it with ashes, sand or lye. The result? Slightly cleaner rags and a lingering smell of smoke and river sludge. Most people don't bother. The logic is sound. Why clean something that's just going to get filthy again in 10 minutes? So your tunic remains stiff with old sweat, food spills, animal hair, and probably something your little brother sneezed out last week. And yes, it itches. Constantly. Everyone in town itches. Lice, fleas, bed bugs. They're your unofficial roommates. You scratch your armpit with a stick. No one notices. Everyone's doing it. That's just life. Historians still argue whether lice were considered a medical issue or just a feature of medieval fashion. You check your reflection in a polished piece of metal nailed to the wall. Your hair is flattened to one side and wild on the other. There's no comb. You use your fingers. The result, chaos with a middle part. You don't own a mirror. You wouldn't want to. As you sling a basket over your shoulder, you glance at your neighbours emerging from their homes. They're dressed exactly like you. Not because you shop at the same store, but because there is no store. Clothing is made at home, spun, woven, sewn and patched by hand. Every thread tells a story, and most of those stories involve spilled stew and accidental singeing by the hearth fire. Wealthier folks, like the reeve or the Lord Steward, might have brighter colours, better stitching, maybe even buttons. You look at them the way modern people look at celebrities, half in awe, half in envy, and completely aware you'll never have what they have. If you're female, the morning routine is even more fun. You wrap yourself in a long kirtle or gown layered over a smock tied tight with a sash. If you're married, you wear a veil or wimple to signal your status. If you're not, everyone knows anyway. Modesty is mandatory. Showing too much skin is scandalous, and possibly suspicious. People have been accused of witchcraft for less. And don't even think about dressing for the weather. There are no wardrobe changes. You wear the same thing in January snow and July heat. You sweat, you shiver, and you just hope for clouds, or a breeze, or at the very least that your underlayer doesn't stick to places it's not supposed to. You give your belt a final tug and take a breath of cold, smoky air. Your fingers are already stiff. Your nose is running, and your tunic, your glorious grime-caked tunic, is hanging just right. This is you, fully dressed, fully prepared, fully miserable. You step outside, armoured in wool and quiet suffering, ready to face the day. Then you remember something that makes your heart sink a little deeper. You haven't brushed your teeth. Because you can't. Not really. Dental hygiene in the Middle Ages is creative. You don't have a toothbrush, or toothpaste, or floss, or even the concept of daily oral care. The idea that your teeth need cleaning is not widespread. You might chew on a twig to scrape off the worst of the grime, maybe fennel or birch if you're feeling fancy. But mostly, your mouth is on its own. You run your tongue over your teeth and feel the texture of barnacles. There are probably crumbs from last week's pottage still wedged between molars. Your gums are sore. One tooth is loose. Another has turned an alarming shade of grey. Historians still argue whether medieval diets kept cavities low or simply replaced them with other mouth-based disasters like abscesses, cracked enamel, and advanced gum disease. You don't smile much. No one does. That's not just cultural, it's practical. A wide grin shows off the wreckage. Most people your age are already missing a few teeth, especially the molars. They fall out from rot, or they're yanked out the old-fashioned way, by force, with tools that double as sewing needles or blacksmith tongs. Toothaches are constant companions. There's a dull one behind your right cheek today. You poke at it with your tongue. Mistake. The pain flares up like a cursed torch. You wince and mutter something under your breath. There's no dentist to call, no numbing gel, no minty rinse. If it gets worse, and it will, the village barber will help. He's not just your stylist, he's your surgeon, your tooth puller, and your occasional bleeder. More on that delightful ritual later. He'll sit you down on a wooden stool, hand you a scrap of leather to bite, and then go at your molar with something sharp, rusty, and vaguely terrifying. There's no anaesthesia, just pain, and probably beer afterward if you're lucky. If the wound gets infected, you might not survive. A single toothache could lead to sepsis. That's right, a cavity might kill you faster than a sword. Sugar isn't widespread yet. It's rare, imported, and mostly for the rich. But even without it, your teeth are on a timer. Your diet is full of coarse bread, stone-ground flour, and unfiltered bits of grit that slowly sandblast your enamel. Every meal is an assault, every chew a gamble. You spit into the dirt and hope today's not the day the tooth explodes. As for mouthwash, some people rinse with vinegar or wine. Occasionally strong herbs like sage or mint are chewed, but they're more for breath than hygiene. Most of the time, no one does anything at all, and halitosis? Universal. You can't tell who has bad breath because everyone does. It's the background noise of social life. Kissing is rare. Intimacy is not exactly a toothpaste commercial kind of moment. If you're married, there's duty. If you're single, there's reputation. But in either case, no one is getting close enough to comment on the state of your bicuspids. In richer circles, some people rub crushed herbs, charcoal, or even powdered coral on their teeth for whitening. But unless you have a purse full of coin and a personal servant with a bone brush, you're not participating in that trend. You sigh through your teeth and wipe your mouth with the back of your sleeve. The taste of breakfast still lingers, fermented bread and whatever that pottage decided to be today. You pull your cloak tighter, ignoring the dull throb in your jaw. You're not smiling today. You haven't smiled in weeks, and if your gums keep bleeding like that, you're not going to be smiling ever again. But you're not dead yet. That counts for something. And so, you pick up your tools, take a swig of morning beer, and step out into the muddy road. The sun is rising, the rooster is crowing, and your molars are quietly plotting to ruin your afternoon. Welcome to oral care in the Middle Ages, where the only thing sharper than your toothache is the tool used to remove it. The sun has clawed its way above the thatched rooftops, casting a thin, muddy light across the village, and that means it's time to work. You don't punch a clock. You don't check your calendar. You don't even stretch, because that might remind your spine it's not ready for another day of medieval misery. You're a peasant, which means your job is simple. Stay alive by working until you can't. You step onto the dirt path leading toward the fields, a crude hoe slung over your shoulder, and a slight limp in your gait that you've learned to ignore. The mud sucks at your shoes, or your bare feet, depending on your current luck with leather. Your joints already ache, and the day hasn't even begun. Your tools? Wooden handles, iron heads, hand-forged if you're fortunate. More often they're dull, splintered, and older than your grandmother's teeth. You don't get new ones unless something breaks, and even then, you might just tie it back together and keep going. The field doesn't care. The soil doesn't wait. The Lord's taxes definitely don't. Your first stop is a strip of land you don't own. None of this is yours. The fields belong to the local lord, and you work them because you're allowed to live on his land in exchange for back-breaking labour. The agreement is called feudalism, and it's less partnership and more try not to die before rent's due. You kneel into the earth and begin the daily ritual of stabbing, turning, sowing, and praying that it rains soon, but not too much. You need just the right balance of sun and water. Too little and the crop fails. Too much and the whole field becomes soup. You hum a half-remembered chant as you go, not for fun, but to drown out the sound of your stomach growling. Historians still debate whether medieval peasants had regular days off beyond religious festivals. The general consensus? Sundays were rest days. Unless, of course, you had to catch up on your quota, fix the roof, slaughter a chicken, or deal with that minor infestation in the granary. And women, they work too. Oh yes, in fact they work twice as much. In the field beside you, your cousin's wife is planting turnips with one hand while rocking a baby in a sling with the other. She's already fed the animals, started the fire, churned butter and mended the tunic you tore last week. Her day started before yours and will end well after. Children, they're here too. Tiny bodies dragging baskets, scattering seeds, shooing away crows. By age 5, they're mini labourers. There's no school, no toys. Just the promise that maybe, if they work hard enough, they'll live long enough to marry someone with slightly better grain. You look up as a cart rolls past, pulled by a wheezing ox and driven by a man with arms like tree trunks. He gives you a nod that says, "Still alive? Me too. Barely." The work is physical. You dig, bend, carry, lift, pull, and repeat. You get blisters that turn into calluses, that sometimes get infected. You learn to walk it off, or drink it off, or just accept that you'll be limping by twilight. You don't take breaks. There's no break room, no lunch hour. If you get to stop, it's because something broke. Your tool, your body, or the weather. Lunch is usually in the field. a crust of bread, maybe some cheese if someone remembered to save a slice from last week, and more beer. You chew while crouching on a stone and try not to think about how much you still have to do before sunset. Some days are better than others. Harvest season, though frantic, is at least hopeful. You gather the fruits of your labour, literally, and store them in wooden bins and woven sacks. But winter is when hope shrivels. When the soil is hard, the tools are useless, and your time is spent just trying not to freeze. That's when you chop wood, repair fences, tend livestock, and pray that your dwindling supplies stretch until the first green of spring. If you're one of the few who's not farming, maybe a blacksmith, a tanner, or a miller, congratulations, your day is just as painful but in a different shade. Blacksmiths work in choking smoke and blinding heat. Tanners spend their days knee-deep in animal hides and urine. Yes, urine is used to cure leather. Millers deal with constant dust, deafening grindstones, and the occasional accusation of cheating peasants out of flour. And there's always risk. Tools slip, oxen kick, trees fall the wrong way. Your best friend could trip over a rock and be trampled by a cart. One bad accident and your work ends permanently, and so does your income. No insurance, no compensation, just a shallow grave and a slightly less crowded hut. And yet, here you are, digging, dragging, sweating. You squint at the sky. The sun is still high. The day still long. You're halfway through a task that never truly ends. Your hands are bleeding again. You flex your fingers, smear the blood into the dirt, and keep going. Because in the Middle Ages, stopping isn't a choice. It's a consequence. As you dig another stubborn root from the cold, compacted soil, you glance up, and there she is. Not a goddess, not a noblewoman, but your neighbour. A woman your age, or maybe younger. It's hard to tell. Everyone looks older in a world where stress ages you faster than the sun. She's working beside you, sleeves rolled up, hands caked in dirt. Her hair is tucked under a linen scarf, her face flushed from effort. She straightens briefly, winces at a pain in her back, and then returns to her task without a word. You both do. Because here's a medieval truth that no one in storybooks wants to mention. If you think being a man is hard right now, try being a woman. It's not just rough. It's relentless. You see, while you were out here planting barley and dodging rocks, she was already up before dawn, stirring the hearth fire, kneading bread, and milking the goat that keeps trying to eat her apron. She's already scolded 3 children, 1 chicken, and her mother-in-law, all before you even finished buttoning your cloak, if you have buttons. She doesn't get a break from labour, she just switches jobs. And let's talk about expectations. If she's unmarried, she's a burden. If she's married, she's property. If she's a widow, she's suspicious. If she talks too much, a witch. If she's too quiet, a witch. If she knows how herbs work, definitely a witch. Historians still argue whether the witch trials were more about fear of female knowledge or fear of female autonomy. Either way, the point is, don't stand out. Marriage isn't about love. It's about alliances, livestock, and getting your family off the hook for feeding you. A girl might be betrothed at 12, married at 14, and pregnant by 15. Her husband is often older, bigger, and not particularly romantic. But that doesn't matter. Her role is locked in from the moment she can carry a bucket, bear children, cook food, keep quiet. Pregnancy is no blessing. It's a coin toss with death. There are no hospitals, no midwives with training beyond "she's done this before", no sterile tools, no knowledge of infection, and absolutely no epidurals. If the baby comes out the wrong way, if labour goes on too long, or if something tears, she dies. Quietly, in a dark hut, surrounded by women who can do nothing but whisper prayers. And if she survives, she has to do it all again. Maybe 10 more times, maybe more. Most children don't make it past 5. Disease, accidents, bad water, famine. It doesn't take much. And yet every time a baby coughs, her heart freezes, hoping it's not another funeral. Then there's the daily grind. Mending clothes, fetching water, spinning wool, feeding animals, nursing babies, cleaning whatever can be cleaned, and still making time to help in the fields. It's not help, really. She does the same work you do, while also keeping a household of 6 from collapsing into chaos. And no, there's no self-care hour, no alone time, no spa days. She might not even know what her own face looks like clearly. There are no mirrors, just the occasional glimpse in a still bucket of water. Her hair gets washed when it rains, and her skin is scrubbed with ash. If she smells nice, it's probably because she walked past a rosemary bush. Her value isn't in her intelligence, though she may be smarter than every man in this village. It's in how well she obeys, how many sons she births, and how little trouble she causes. She might have dreams, but they're buried beneath baskets of laundry and a never-ending cycle of chores, and heaven help her if she breaks the rules. Maybe she laughs too loudly. Maybe she dances at a festival. Maybe she owns a book, if she can read at all. That's when the whispers start. That's when the church gets involved. A few questions, a few accusations, and suddenly she's tied to a stake or dropped into a river. If she floats, she's guilty. If she sinks, well, at least she's innocent. You glance at her again. Her hands are red and cracked. Her face is unreadable. She adjusts her scarf and keeps working. There's no time for complaints. There's barely time to breathe. She is the quiet backbone of a crumbling world, and no one even says thank you. You get to rest when your job is done. She rests when everyone else is still breathing. And so she moves through her day like the tide, constant, invisible, and vital. You pause just for a second, wiping sweat from your brow with the sleeve of your already filthy tunic. The sun isn't even at its peak, and your body feels like it's been wrung out and left to dry on a crooked fence. But your muscles are far from your biggest problem right now, because the weather wants you dead. In the Middle Ages, there's no such thing as checking the forecast. Your forecast is the sky, and it hates you. Today it's sunny, but that doesn't mean nice. It means hot. Not beach day hot, but suffocating, layered in wool with no way out hot. You're sweating under fabric you can't remove without being considered scandalous. Even in 90-degree heat, you're expected to stay covered from neck to wrist to ankle. Modesty is sacred. Comfort? Not so much. Your clothes cling to your skin like a second, soggier skin. There's no deodorant, of course. You stink. Everyone stinks. It's the smell of effort, survival, and collective resignation. Flies hover like tiny judges, buzzing around your face, your food, your everything. You swat one away and keep going. They always come back. Shade is rare, and if you're in the fields, there's none. You keep your head down, hoping the itch under your collar is just sweat and not another flea. Historians still debate whether medieval peasants suffered more from sunstroke or chronic insect bites. You're voting for both. But if you think summer is bad, just wait for winter. The fields freeze over. The soil turns to rock. The wind cuts through your house like a ghost with a grudge. Remember how your home has no insulation. That means every breath you take fogs the air, and every movement cracks like ice breaking on a frozen pond. Your nose runs constantly. Your fingers turn purple. Your feet. They haven't felt warm since October. There's no central heating, no fireplace in your bedroom, because you don't have a bedroom. There's one hearth for the entire family, and firewood is precious. You bundle up in your same damp cloak and hope your siblings don't roll over and steal what little warmth you've trapped. Collecting firewood, by the way, is not just hard. It can be illegal. Forests are often controlled by the Lord, and taking fallen branches can get you fined, or worse. You sneak into the woods under cover of darkness, praying no one catches you, just for the right to stay slightly less frozen. When it rains, it seeps through the thatched roof and soaks everything. Your bedding, your clothes, your grain supply. You shiver in the night, swaddled in wet wool, praying that your cough doesn't turn into something worse. And spring? Spring isn't a fresh start, it's mud season. The thaw turns roads into bogs and outhouses into soup. Everything smells like wet fur and fermented cabbage. Your boots, if you have any, squelch with every step. So no, there is no good season in the Middle Ages, just different versions of inconvenience and danger. There's no snow day, no summer vacation, no lazy afternoon rain naps, just the elements, doing their best to remind you who's in charge. And spoiler, it's not you. You might get lucky once in a while. A warm breeze, a gentle morning, a day without clouds. But even those are deceptive. A bright spring day might mean late frost that kills your crops. A dry summer might turn to drought. And a sudden thunderstorm. Lightning strikes were a real fear, especially with no grounding, no surge protectors, and plenty of tall wooden buildings. So you adapt, you bundle up, you sweat through it. You carry your chores through blizzards and heat waves. You learn which winds bring rain, and which clouds mean hail. You watch the animals and the trees for signs because they know more than you do. You become a weather expert without wanting to. And still, you suffer. Because in the Middle Ages, climate control means choosing whether to sleep near the fire and risk smoke inhalation, or away from it and risk frostbite. You stretch your back, scan the sky again. A dark cloud on the horizon. Could be nothing, could be everything. Either way, the sky is always watching, and it never ever cares. By now, you're hot, itchy, slightly dizzy from the sun, and wondering how much worse the day can get. And then, you feel it. Thirst, a simple craving, a sip of something cool, clean, refreshing. Something to rinse the sour taste of breakfast porridge and mild despair from your mouth. Too bad water is trying to kill you. In the Middle Ages, clean drinking water is a myth whispered about like dragons or honest tax collectors. You walk to the village well, bucket in hand, passing chickens, dogs and barefoot children. The well is public property, and it looks the part. Damp stones, mossy rope. The occasional smell of something you hope is mud. You lower the bucket, listening to the creak of wood and the splash below. You haul it up with effort, your shoulders burning. The water sloshes, cold and surprisingly clear. But don't be fooled. What looks clean can be lethal. See, upstream from this very well, someone dumped the contents of their chamber pot. A cow wandered through last night and may or may not have contributed to the local ecosystem. And little Timmy was washing his feet here this morning, mostly because he dropped something valuable and had to fish it out. Microbiology hasn't been invented yet, but the consequences are well known. People don't trust water, they fear it. Cholera, dysentery, typhoid. They don't know the names, but they know the symptoms. Stomach cramps, vomiting, death, often in that order. So what do you drink? Beer. Weak, cloudy, lukewarm beer. Not the pub-worthy stuff with froth and foam, but small ale, brewed low on alcohol, high on survivability. It's safer than water because the brewing process involves boiling, which kills the worst of the lurking horrors. Even children drink it. Even babies sip it. Everyone starts their day a little buzzed and slightly dehydrated. You take a swig now from a leather flask, grimacing at the taste. It's sour and flat, but your stomach doesn't seize up, so that's a win. Historians still argue just how drunk the average medieval person was. Some believe the alcohol content was so low it didn't matter. Others suggest people were mildly tipsy for most of their adult lives. And let's be honest, with a life like this, who could blame them? Rich folk might have access to wine, but you're not rich, and even wine isn't a guarantee. Without preservatives or corked bottles, it spoils fast. The village priest gets a decent batch sometimes, enough to keep mass cheerful. The rest of you drink what doesn't make you sick. Hopefully. Bathing, by the way, is not your salvation. In fact, many believe it's dangerous. The thinking goes like this. When you bathe, your pores open. When your pores open, evil miasmas, bad air basically, can sneak in and make you ill. So instead of scrubbing away your troubles, you're inviting them in. That's why most people don't bathe often, and when they do, it's not the warm soak you're dreaming of. First, you carry water, a lot of it, from the well to your house. Then, you heat it over the fire, pour it into a leaky wooden tub and take turns. The eldest goes first, the youngest goes last. You're somewhere in the middle, hoping the water's still warm and that no one had any surprise accidents along the way. Soap? If you have it, it's homemade from animal fat and ash. It smells like something that haunts cellars. There were public bathhouses once, places where you could scrub yourself beside your neighbours in lukewarm, cloudy water. But over time, these places became associated with more colourful social activities. The church didn't approve, many were shut down. And even if you do bathe, you're dirty again the moment you step outside. Dust clings to your skin, mud grips your feet, fleas hop aboard like entitled guests. You splash a little water on your face now from the bucket, ignoring the bits of leaf and the suspicious speck floating on top. It's cold, refreshing, probably not fatal, you hope. Because in this world, even something as basic as thirst is a gamble. Water is everywhere. But safe water, that's the stuff of legends. And tonight, when you lie down and your stomach churns, you'll wonder, was it the beer, the soup, the well, or just life doing what it always does, reminding you that survival is never guaranteed. You're back in the village now, trudging through streets that double as ditches and smell like regret. Your throat still burns faintly from the mystery drink you dared call beer, and your muscles feel like they've been trampled by an overenthusiastic ox. Naturally, this is the perfect time to get sick. It starts small, a headache, a strange chill, a tightness in your gut that you chalk up to the pottage from 2 nights ago, possibly fermented, definitely questionable. But here's the catch. In the Middle Ages, illness isn't just common, it's constant. You could be battling anything from scurvy to the flu to something dramatically named the bloody flux, a lovely condition that involves violent, unstoppable diarrhea and a farewell tour through your digestive system. You sit down on a stone stoop, dizzy, wiping sweat from your brow. Maybe it's just fatigue, maybe not. Either way, you're out of luck, because there is no doctor. Not the kind you're imagining, at least. No clinic, no antibiotics, no cheerful nurse taking your temperature and assuring you it's probably viral. Instead, your options include a village-wise woman with dried herbs and strong opinions, a barber surgeon who sharpens razors, lances boils, and might double as your cousin's dentist, a priest with holy water and a very stern look. Medicine is based on the theory of the 4 humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. According to medieval science, health is about balance. Got a fever, too much blood. The solution? Bloodletting. Yes, you heard that right. You bleed to get better. The barber surgeon rolls up his sleeves, opens a pouch of tools that look like props from a horror film, and selects a dull blade or a leech. Leech therapy is real. He plops a wriggling little parasite onto your skin, and it gets to work like it's at an all-you-can-eat buffet. You try not to scream. The bleeding is supposed to rebalance your humours, or purge your sins, or maybe it just gives the problem something else to focus on. Historians still argue whether this actually helped, or if everyone just pretended it did to avoid panic. Feel faint yet? Good. Let's say you're lucky and avoid the knife. Maybe you're prescribed a purge instead, a pleasant mix of herbal laxatives designed to, clear you out. The logic: illness is bad, pooping is good, therefore maximum pooping equals restored health. Medieval math. Or perhaps you're offered a tonic made from crushed beetles, powdered bone, or fermented mouse paste. Yes, mouse. The ancients had a recipe for everything, none of them appetizing. And if your symptoms involve dreams, visions, or general weirdness, expect a priest to show up. Illness is often seen as spiritual, punishment from God, or worse, a sign of possession. You'll be sprinkled with holy water, prayed over, maybe even exorcised if things get too spooky. After all, demons love a weak immune system. You cough again, and an old woman glances at you suspiciously. That's the other problem. Sickness isn't private, it's feared. Too much sneezing and your neighbours start crossing themselves. A rash. You're cursed. A swollen neck. Witchcraft. A bad fever. People might stop visiting altogether just in case you're contagious. Or worse, plague. Ah yes, the plague. It's not here now, but everyone remembers. Bubonic, pneumonic, and septicemic. Each one worse than the last. Entire villages vanished. Corpses piled in churches, the air thick with the smell of death and desperation. You hear someone say the word in a hushed tone. You keep your head down, because once the rumours start, you're not just sick, you're marked, and if things get truly dire, your final option is confession. You lie in bed, weak and sweating, while a priest leans in close. He asks you to make peace with your soul, because sometimes the cure is just a well-timed goodbye. The worst part? You might survive, and that still doesn't mean recovery. No rest, no convalescence. You get out of bed, half-healed, still coughing, and return to work, because if you don't, your family doesn't eat. No one brings soup, no one checks in. You just go back to the fields, dragging your fever with you like a second shadow. So today, you try not to breathe too deeply. You avoid anyone coughing. You ignore your stomachache. Because here in medieval Europe, being sick isn't an inconvenience. It's a threat. And more often than not, it wins. The sun finally dips below the treetops, casting the village in long golden shadows. You'd like to think this means the work is over, that you'll now sink into a well-earned evening of relaxation, maybe a hot bath, a bit of music, a little me time. Nope. Evening in the Middle Ages doesn't bring peace. It brings new duties, new discomforts, and new chances for something to go terribly wrong. You trudge back toward your hut, every muscle humming with exhaustion. You smell like earth, smoke, sweat, and faint disappointment. Your stomach growls, but not with excitement, just in cautious anticipation. Dinner awaits. Sort of. You step into the darkening room. Someone has added a few sticks to the fire and the pot over the hearth is steaming again. That same pottage from this morning, still going strong, still suspicious, still the village's least favourite group project. The smell is nostalgic. A sour mix of old beans, root vegetables, and whatever someone found lying around the edge of the yard that vaguely resembled food. A strip of dried pork skin floats near the top. It's been in there for 3 days now. No one's had the courage to fish it out. You eat your dinner slowly, chewing through it with all the enthusiasm of a condemned man eating his last meal, and then realising it's just more of the same gruel he's had every night for years. The bread's harder now, the beer's warmer, but no one complains. Complaining won't conjure a chicken. You eat beside your family, sharing a single wooden spoon, and trying not to notice the rats scratching at the walls. They're part of the household. You stopped naming them after the third plague scare. Speaking of plague, let's talk about food safety. It doesn't exist. Meat, if you get any, is preserved by salting, drying, or smoking. No refrigeration. You sniff it. You hope for the best. You eat around the green bits. You learn to chew with one eye closed. Your neighbour once ate spoiled rye bread during a famine year. Turns out it was infected with ergot, a fungus that causes hallucinations, seizures, and sometimes death. She spent 2 days screaming at the sky, convinced her cow was a talking demon. Then she died. They buried her in the same cloak she was married in. Historians still debate whether mass poisonings from ergot were behind some witch sightings in Northern Europe. You're not a scholar. You just know which bakery to avoid. Vegetables, whatever's in season. You get a lot of turnips, sometimes onions. If it's a special night, maybe a beet. Fruit is rare and spoils fast unless it's been turned into cider or wine, which ironically is safer than water. And don't even think about spices. You couldn't afford pepper even if you sold your soul and half the village with it. The wealthy hoard cinnamon and cloves like treasure. Salt is used sparingly and stored under lock and key. Your food is seasoned with smoke and lowered expectations. Dessert? That's adorable. You scrape the bottom of the bowl. No one talks much. The fire pops and crackles. A child whines. A baby cries. Somewhere outside, a dog howls. The village settles into a soft, exhausted hum. Now normally you'd get ready for bed. But tonight, the Lord Steward is making his rounds. You hear him before you see him, boots crunching on the path, a voice barking about taxes, quotas, and missed obligations. You hold your breath. He knocks. Your mother answers, head bowed. He counts your chickens, inspects your grain stores, and marks something down in his ledger. You offer a respectful nod. He leaves without a word. You exhale. He didn't take anything today. That's good. That's rare. You finish your dinner in silence, every clink of the bowl echoing in your ears. You think about tomorrow. It'll be the same tasks, the same aches, the same everything. But you'll do it. Because you have to. Because in the Middle Ages, choice is a luxury for nobles and priests. And you're neither. You place your bowl on the floor. The rats will handle the rest. Dinner is done, your stomach is reluctantly full, and your muscles are buzzing with that dull ache that doesn't really go away. Just shifts location depending on the time of day. You look forward to rest, but let's not pretend you're heading toward a plush mattress and blackout curtains. You're heading to bed, yes, but bed is a generous word. It's a sack stuffed with straw, maybe a little hay, sometimes moss. If you're really unlucky, it's also stuffed with bugs. The mattress is on the floor. The floor is dirt. Not rustic farmhouse chic dirt, just dirt. The kind that gets damp in the winter and crackles with fleas in the summer. There's no frame, no support, no duvet, just layers of exhaustion and a heavy, unwashed wool blanket that smells like goat and regret. And speaking of goats, one of them might be asleep nearby. Your hut is a shared space. Humans, animals, insects, and the occasional draft. The chickens are roosting on the rafters. A dog is curled up by the fire. Your little brother is already snoring with his mouth open and a crust of dinner on his chin. Privacy doesn't exist. You sleep where there's room. Parents, siblings, aunt who never left. Everyone packed in like poorly stacked laundry. You roll to your side, trying not to elbow your cousin. Again, there are no pyjamas. You sleep in your clothes, because changing would mean owning more than one outfit. The same itchy wool that tortured you during the day now hugs you at night. And if it's winter, you're thankful for every louse-ridden layer. The fire is low, just a few glowing embers. You pull your cloak tighter and shiver. Cold creeps in through the cracks in the walls, whispers under the door and settles on your toes like a judgmental cat. You breathe out and watch your breath hang in the air. It's that cold. Now about lighting, there's none. No candles unless you're wealthy or a priest. Maybe a rushlight if you're lucky, a thin reed dipped in tallow that burns fast and smells worse. Most nights, it's just the fire and the moonlight slipping through the gaps in the roof. You close your eyes, and then the noises start. The village is quiet but not silent. You hear rats scurrying across the rafters. The donkey outside brays once, annoyed at something only it understands. A baby coughs. A man somewhere down the path sings a drunken hymn. Someone else answers with a curse. You shift, your hip pressing into the floor. No cushion, just centuries of packed earth and a few sharp pebbles placed there, seemingly on purpose by fate itself. You try to sleep. You really do, but sleep is fickle. You itch. You think you hear a bug crawling. You hope it's not inside your shirt. You start to drift off, and then your neighbour's rooster crows. It's not dawn. The rooster just has opinions. You sigh. Tomorrow is coming, and with it another round of work, hunger, and weather-based insults. But before you surrender to slumber, there's one more thing to consider. Church. You haven't been yet today, have you? In medieval Europe, religion isn't a weekend activity. It's the rhythm of your entire life. The church bell rings 3, sometimes 4 times a day, marking moments of prayer and reflection. You're supposed to kneel, cross yourself, and recite the same Latin verses you've half memorized, even if you don't understand a word of them. Miss too many prayers? People notice. The priest notices. And if the priest thinks you've been sinful, he might make you confess in public. Or worse, suggest penance that involves fasting or extra labour. Historians still argue how much fear versus faith drove religious life for common people. For you, it's both. You believe because you were taught to, and you fear because you've seen what happens when people stray too far from the fold. You whisper a quick prayer now, half asleep, asking for health, food, warmth, and that your cousin doesn't kick you in his sleep again. You finally start to drift. Your body curls into itself, shrinking against the cold. And just as you fade into a dream of slightly cleaner straw and slightly warmer bread, a drop of something lands on your face. The roof is leaking. You don't even open your eyes. Just one more night in paradise. You wake before the rooster this time, not because you're well rested, but because a sharp cramp in your back refuses to let you sleep any longer. It's still dark, just a faint grey blur leaking through the wooden slats of your windowless wall. You blink, confused for a second, then remember where you are, who you are, and what this day promises. More of the same, but first, relief. Nature calls again, and unlike modern times where a sleepy shuffle to a porcelain throne is followed by a gentle flush and a sigh of relief, your experience is, shall we say, more interactive. You pull on your boots, or if you've misplaced them, your willpower, and step outside into the cold mud. There's no designated bathroom area. You either head to the family's wooden bucket out back, already half full and very much not emitting spa scents, or you brave the public trench down the path. That one's communal, frequently overflowing, and impossible to approach without gagging. Either way, you hope it hasn't rained too much, or you're in for a slip and slide of human error. Wiping? Not exactly luxurious. There's no soft paper, no aloe vera infused anything. Just straw, moss, leaves, or rags. If you're rich, maybe wool scraps. If you're poor, and you are, you just try not to think about it, and once you're done, you throw it into the street. Yes, really. Custom dictates you yell "Gardy-loo" or "Beware below" before dumping your waste out the window or from your doorstep. It's meant to be polite. It's rarely effective. Streets are lined with open sewage, animal droppings, fish guts, and mysterious slop that you pray never touches your shoes. Children play near it. Dogs roll in it. Life goes on. And there's no sanitation crew, no garbage truck, no street cleaner. The rains wash things away eventually. All the pigs do. You head back inside, trying to block out the smell. You're used to it by now, but some mornings it still hits you hard. Like warm soup gone very, very wrong. A fragrant mix of stale beer, wet hay, manure, and human contribution. The village perfume. Your stomach churns, and not just because of the stench. You ate something weird last night. You know it. It was that pottage. It had a tang to it. You try not to dwell. You can't afford a day off for food poisoning. Now you splash some water on your face. It's freezing. It helps you wake up. There's no soap, of course. Just a rag and cold fingers scrubbing at sleep crust and yesterday's soot. Your reflection in the bucket is distorted, but you don't need a clear image to know you look tired. Everyone looks tired. You stretch. Carefully. Your shoulders pop. Your knees crackle like a dry fire. You're 23, which feels like 50. Life expectancy is short. If you live past 40, people start calling you the elder and asking you about toothless legends and failed harvests. And before your day can even properly begin, there's drama. Down the lane, someone is shouting. It's old Merrick again, accusing the Thatcher's boy of stealing eggs or tools, or maybe just looking suspicious. Merrick's got one good eye, a limp, and a deep distrust of anyone under the age of 30, which in this village is everyone. You stay out of it. Always do, because disputes escalate fast around here. And justice? Well, that's another messy subject. There is no call the police. There is no impartial court. If there's a conflict, it either goes before the village reeve, a man as impartial as a tilted ladder, or the Lord's bailiff who cares more about unpaid taxes than stolen chickens. Punishments vary wildly. A fine you can't afford, a public whipping, time in the stocks, or worse. If you're accused of something serious, witchcraft, heresy, theft of sacred objects, you might be looking at trial by ordeal. One version, you're forced to plunge your hand into boiling water to retrieve a stone. If your wound heals clean in 3 days, you're innocent. If it festers, well, guilty. Another, they tie you up and throw you into a river. If you float, you're in league with the devil. If you sink, congratulations. You're pure of heart. Also, very dead. It's law as performance, justice as theatre, pain as proof. You shake your head and walk on, careful not to trip over a loose cobblestone or step in whatever was dumped last night. You pass a row of huts, their wooden frames sagging like old spines. You pass the priest's house, the only place with a real door. You pass Agnes, hunched over a basket of laundry, muttering curses in a dialect older than the road you're walking on. And in the centre of the village square, you pass the stocks, empty today. But they rarely stay that way for long. The day drags on like a tired ox, slow, heavy, and always threatening to collapse. You've managed to avoid slipping in anything questionable, survived breakfast again, if barely, and steered clear of Merrick's wrath. But just when you think you've seen the worst of medieval life, something reminds you. Violence isn't an exception here. It's the background noise. Out in the fields, at the market, even in the church pews, violence is as common as dirt, and sometimes you are the dirt. You're careful where you look and who you look at, especially the reeve, especially the steward, and especially anyone wearing armour. Status doesn't just protect, it invites brutality. Say the wrong thing to the wrong person, and you might find yourself on the receiving end of a fist, a lash, or something much sharper. Disagreements aren't solved with words. They're settled with sticks, stones, and sometimes trial by combat. Yes, that was a thing. You could literally fight to prove you're right. Historians still debate whether these duels of truth were more about actual justice or just giving people an excuse to beat each other senseless in front of a cheering crowd. And crowds love violence. Public punishments are community events. The stocks, entertainment, whippings, a spectacle, executions, bring the kids. There's no YouTube here, but there's blood in the square on Sunday. Steal a loaf of bread? You could lose a hand. Gossip too much. You might wear the scold's bridle, a metal cage clamped around your head, complete with a tongue-pressing plate and public humiliation as your evening entertainment. Get caught poaching a deer on the Lord's land? That's not just frowned upon. That's hanging a fence. You saw it once. A thief, strung up by the gallows near the forest path. No ceremony, just silence, a wooden beam and a rope. No one cried, no one stopped it. They just muttered, "Better him than me," and walked on. Domestic violence, accepted, expected. A man is the head of his household. He disciplines his wife, his children, his servants. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Women who resist too loudly risk more than bruises. They risk the branding iron, the ducking stool, or worse, being labelled a witch. And when someone is accused of witchcraft, things escalate, fast. A strange rash, a failed crop, a cow that won't milk, that's all it takes. People start whispering, fingers point, and before long, a woman is dragged out of her hut, tied to a chair and dunked in the river until she either confesses or stops breathing. Even the church, meant to be a place of peace, is no refuge. Arguments erupt over pew seating, tithes, or who gets to hold the communion bowl. You once saw two grown men brawl over a goat that wandered too close to the altar. The priest tried to break it up with a candle holder. He failed. You walk past the blacksmith's hut. Sparks fly from inside. He's yelling at his apprentice again. It's not even noon. You walk past the alehouse. Two men are shouting. One throws a cup, the other throws a punch. The door slams. Normal. But violence isn't just physical. There's the quiet kind, the systemic kind. You're born into a station and you stay there. You're taxed, tithed, and trodden on. You give 1/10 of your grain to the church, more to your lord, and somehow still owe more. You work land you don't own. You live in a home that leaks and moulds and sags, and if you speak out, you're reminded who holds the sword. And let's not forget war. Local feuds, noble disputes, crusades. There's always someone raising an army. You might be conscripted, handed a stick or a rusted sword, and shoved onto a battlefield you don't understand, told to kill men who speak a different dialect and wear a slightly different hat. You've seen the veterans return, the ones who do return, missing fingers, missing eyes, dragging their feet like ghosts with weight still chained to their backs. So today, like every day, you move through the world carefully. Eyes down, mouth shut, shoulders low. You step over a patch of dried blood in the village square. No one's cleaned it. No one will. Because in the Middle Ages, violence doesn't break the rules. It is the rule. By now you've made it through another medieval day. Barely. Your limbs ache, your feet are numb, and your thoughts blur at the edges. But just when you think it might be time to crawl into your flea-ridden straw pile and vanish from this relentless timeline, a sharp cough echoes across the hut. You turn. It's the baby. Again. Her cheeks are flushed, her breath wheezy. Your mother rocks her gently, humming an old song passed down from someone who probably also died too young. Your heart sinks because you've seen this before. Coughs don't stay, coughs for long, they grow teeth. Infant mortality hovers like a curse. Nearly half of all children die before reaching their 5th birthday. Disease, famine, accidents, superstition. There's 1,000 ways to lose a child and not one way to stop it. You pull your cloak tighter and stare at the rafters, trying not to imagine a too small burial wrapped in linen and sorrow. Death in the Middle Ages isn't an event. It's a constant hum in the background of every breath you take. You wake with it. You work beside it. You eat knowing it might be your last meal. You carry it in your bones. For most, death doesn't come with ceremony. You collapse in the field. You shiver through a fever. You simply stop waking. There's no doctor, no post-mortem, no respectful autopsy. Just a hole in the ground, a muttered prayer, and the hope that your soul finds better company than your body ever did. If you're important, maybe a knight, a landholder, a priest, you might get a coffin, maybe even a tombstone. But if you're a peasant, you're lucky to be buried at all. The graveyard's full, the church is busy. Sometimes the body's burned, or tossed into a pit with others from the same plague wave. And when the plague does arrive, it doesn't knock. It kicks down the door, rips through villages like fire in dry straw and leaves silence in its wake. One cough, one swelling, one night, and then nothing. No goodbye, no understanding, just black boils and panic. Historians still debate whether it was fleas, bad air, trade routes, or divine punishment. For you, it doesn't matter. All you know is that it comes fast, and when it does, the carts roll through town collecting bodies, and no one dares look them in the eye. You think of your neighbour, old Cuthbert, who once carved spoons with astonishing care. He slipped on ice last winter, broke his leg, and never got up again. Infection took him. The fever followed. His spoons are still in his hut. You think of Mira, the girl who laughed too loudly and drew stars in the dirt. The fever took her too. She was gone before the snow melted. You think of your own body, how it hurts, how it limps, how it bends in strange ways now. You're 29. People call you seasoned. They're not wrong. If you live to 40, you're a miracle. And if you live past that, you're the village elder, the storyteller, the one they ask about herbs and ghosts and whether the moon looks different this year. You carry everyone's memory and no one remembers to carry yours. You lie back now, the fire low, the baby still coughing. The shadows stretch long across the ceiling beams, flickering like ancient fingers tracing the past. You close your eyes, and this time you let your thoughts soften, and here comes the wind down. Your breath slows as the village quiets. Outside the night is velvet, cool, steady, whispering through the cracks in the thatch like an old lullaby. You can hear the faint rustle of trees in the distance, the creak of the barn settling into its nighttime stillness, the occasional hoot of an owl riding the air like a watchful spirit. The fire sighs, letting out its final puff of smoke before fading to orange embers. Someone nearby is already dreaming, soft murmurs, quiet breaths, wrapped in layers of wool and exhaustion. You pull the blanket up to your chin, ignoring the scratch. You let your limbs sink into the straw, the ache fading into the background like the hum of an old story you've heard 100 times before. The stars above this world are sharp and cold, but they shine all the same, watching, remembering, bearing witness to every laugh, every loss, every little act of resilience in this hard, relentless century. You don't have much, no riches, no legacy, just another day survived. But here, in the hush of this medieval night, even that feels holy. So rest now. The earth turns, the sun will rise again, and somewhere, across centuries and stories, you are still here, still breathing, still enduring,